What are some of the hurdles that step families face or blended families face that a church leader might not be aware of? That the typical mom, dad, two and a
Yeah.
half kids and a dog, family doesn't face. That a blended family might, that they then have an opportunity to have a unique ministry to them.
In March of 2020, the entire world started getting a crash course in step-family living, believe it or not. It was called the pandemic. And life in a blended family is as different as life in a pandemic versus life before the pandemic. Now, everybody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. In March of 2020, you were thrust back into home doing children, doing school, doing work, all in the same space, stepping on each other's toes. How do we navigate this? Not really sure. What is this medical issue going on? How do we handle it? Some say mask, some say don't. We're still having arguments, by the way, in our world, 3 years later about all this. And it's because of ambiguity. See, that one word sort of wraps up what the pandemic was like. We didn't really know what we had. We didn't know how to deal with it. And there's lots of polarization and arguments politically, medically, et cetera, to try to figure out how to manage it. That, in a word, is step family living on day one. Ambiguity. I'm a step parent now. I know what it is to be a dad. I got 2 kids of my own, but now I'm a stepdad to your kids, and so I assume it's the same, and you find out real fast it is very different. You don't have the same authority. You don't have the same relationship equity with those children. Some of them like you, some of them don't, some of them sort of do, while your spouse is saying, be the dad to my kids. Well, I can't because they won't let me. So what is my role? Do you hear the ambiguity in that?
Right.
Nobody really knows what to do. And that ambiguity is so frustrating. And guess what? That's another loss on top of the loss that made the blended family happen in the first place. Loss of divorce or loss of a death of a parent, or increasingly there are lots of first-time couples, first-time marriages, I should say, forming blended families. So you had somebody who had a child out of wedlock. Now they're marrying somebody who's not the biological parent. That's a blended family. Nobody's ever been married before. Guess what? Loss gives birth to more loss and lots of unknowns. And as a couple is wandering through that experience, trying to find the promised land, they need a map.
Right.
It's as simple as that. When we come alongside them and go, look, okay, there is a Canaan. Hang on, we're going to help you get there, but here's the path you have to travel. All of a sudden, there's hope, there's energy, there's excitement, and they have some direction. It's really not difficult. But we do have to have maps. And, that's one of the things we do at Family Life Blended is provide resources that essentially equip church leaders to have maps.
Well, obviously at D6, we're all about discipling in the home, which talking about the ambiguity of the relationship between step parent and child, I'm sure that adds a strange layer if they don't even know if they have authority. And then sometimes you have 4 parents that are involved in that, and then who's responsible? What role does the blended family dynamic, what role does that play in discipleship and with the kids? And how do you kind of figure that out? Maybe give some steps here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, quick analogy. I have a friend in Ghana who said, ask him once, what did you learn about parenting growing up as a young man? And he said, my dad taught me 2 voices do not raise a child. 1 voice raises a child. Wow. What he's saying is when you're singing off the same sheet of music as mom and dad, your kids have a consistent message of where true north is. That's what we're trying to do in discipleship from one generation to the next. We tell them what truth is. We tell them who God is. We live that out. They see it modeled. They feel it. They experience it. They go to church. The message is the same. This really helps faith developing in children. Now, assume mom and dad divorce. Now we have potentially 2 different voices because mom and dad didn't really agree in the beginning. 2 different songs, 2 different sheets of music.
Yeah.
And dad recouples, and we have a 3rd influence in the child's life. Mom gets married again. That lasts about 4 years, and then she divorces, and then she moves in with a guy. So we're now up to, 6 different voices? And children are being chameleons as they move to dad's house and then mom's house, different values, different things that they emphasize, different passions within the home. That all influences children. And by the way, count the grandparents in this little scenario. We probably have 10 to 14 grandparents. So we're up to 19 or 20 influences, not 1 voice. And here's the thing, Casey. This teaches children postmodernism. It teaches them to think all truths are the same. It teaches. Now stop and think about that for a minute.
Well, it's an authority in their life, and
Exactly.
so aren't they supposed to trust the
Exactly.
people who love them, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And you do. And out of loyalty, you care about what they think. And
Right.
so you don't want to hurt their feelings by saying, no, Dad, I'm not going to watch that R-rated movie because Jesus says we shouldn't do that. So a kid does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Dad's house. And it's, and all of a sudden, the lack of boundaries in one home begins to flourish within a child. And it's not one voice. This makes discipleship much more difficult. So when we help whatever recoupling has taken place, we kind of wish we could back up and erase the whole scenario, but we can't. And so what are we going to do? Just abandon them, say good luck? No, I think we help Mom and her new husband figure out how to have one voice in that home, figure out how to have a stable marriage, because now we have a chance of providing some stability, not just emotional and relational stability, but spiritual stability in the life of that child. It becomes a redemptive mechanism in the life of that child. That all assumes we know how to help Mom and new partner have a stable marriage and family. When we can do that, it's really, really helpful.